the first time I tasted blood that Christmas, it wasn't from the cocoa I had been stirring for Laurel's family. My name is Griffin Ward, and I never believed a holiday could turn into something this violent. I still remember the way the kitchen lights glinted off the refrigerator's stainless steel door as I turned to hand Laurel her mock. Instead of her usual smile, I saw her face harden, expression twisting so quickly, I wondered if I'd imagined it. Before I could ask what was wrong, her brother Seth's fists connected with my rib cage. Pain erupted like an electric shock, stealing my breath and sending me crashing into the freezer's cold surface. My back slammed against metal with a hollow thud that echoed in my ears, and I tasted copper on my tongue. At first, I thought it was only the adrenaline masking the impact until I heard the sickening crack as Jordan's fist followed Seth's, striking my cheekbone. I staggered, vision spinning. The world became a blur of plaid ties, polished shoes, and Laurel's eyes glinting with savage satisfaction. She didn't step forward to stop them. She didn't even flinch. She stood by the counter, arms folded, cloak of silence wrapped around her like armor. Someone else might have yelled for help, but her family preferred violence to conversation. I tried to speak, tried to tell them the mistake they were making, but all I managed was a rasping cough. I backed away, hand pressed against my bleeding nose, and reached for my phone. My trembling fingers brushed the smooth glass screen, and I felt a flicker of hope. I pictured dialing 911, a dispatcher's calm voice, sirens wailing outside. Maybe an ambulance, maybe justice. But before I could unlock the screen, Laurel's hand shot out and snatched the phone from my grasp. She held it just out of my reach, white-knuckled, and hissed, "It's just a scratch, Griffin. Don't be dramatic." Her father stood in the doorway, arms crossed over his broad chest. He wore a look of bored disinterest, as if he were observing some minor inconvenience rather than the assault of his son-in-law. "Drama king," he muttered, voice low enough that only I could hear. His words chilled me more than any blow. In that moment, everything inside me went still cold, unforgiving, precise. I stumbled toward the bathroom, each footfall heavier than the last. The Legis lister that was ruled to have the word behind me. Laurel's laughter rang. Soft, mocking, triumphant. I didn't look back. I didn't want to see the cruel smirk on her brothers' faces or the proud nod her father gave them. I closed the bathroom door and leaned against it, shoulders sagging as adrenaline drained away, leaving me bone-tired and raw with pain. Flickering fluorescent lights revealed the horror on my reflection. Blood smeared across my upper lip, a darkening bruise swelling under my left eye, and eyes reened from tears I'd refused to shed. I knelt before the sink and washed my face, fingertips trembling as they wiped away the blood. My heart pounded in my throat. But I felt something else, an icy calm that settled over me like a second skin. I stared at my reflection until my breathing evened out, and the rage simmered down into a cold, focused ember. I could almost hear Laurel's voice in my head repeating her mantra of lies. "You've been distant. You're hiding something. I saw the way you looked at that woman." The mystery woman line sliced deeper than any fist. She had discovered a scarf in my car, my colleague's scarf, and spun it into proof of infidelity. Never mind that the colleague in question was a close friend I had merely given a ride home. Never mind the truth. Laurel and her family preferred a villain to maintain the narrative that kept their perfect image intact. I splashed water on my face and felt the sting of broken skin, an echo of how they had shattered my life. My reflection stared back as blazing with a promise I could scarcely believe. I would make them see the truth, not through screams or fights, through calculated moves that would strip away their lies brick by brick. I straightened, wiped my hands on my sweater, and studied the small red smear left on the counter. Blood on the fridge door, a stain that would not be wiped away so easily. In that cramped bathroom, I made a choice. I would no longer be the man who cowed in silence while his world was dismantled by falsehoods and violence. I would not plead with Seth and Jordan to stop. I would not beg Laurel for mercy. Instead, I would rebuild, stronger, smarter, unbreakable. I would turn their attack into fuel, their betrayal into strategy, and their laughter into my motivation. I pressed my palm against the cold tile wall and let my head rest there, eyes closed. The distant hum of holiday music and clinking dishes drifted through the house, grotesquely at odds with the violence I had endured. They could keep their perfect Christmas traditions. They could keep their stories and their silence, because I was already planning mine. And when the time came, I would make sure they all remembered the man who never shouted, not once, who didn't need to prove anything with fists or tears, but with the quiet, relentless power of a life claimed. And by then, they would know exactly who Griffin Ward really was. The bathroom door clicked behind me as I closed myself off from their judgments and their laughter. I leaned back against the cool tile, hearts still hammering from the violence of the night before. My reflections stared back at me, distorted by cracked porcelain and stread. I pressed a paper towel to the worst of the cuts, then watched as droplets of red blurred and faded beneath the swirl of cold water. In that quiet moment, I realized I was discovering a new kind of stillness, one not born of fear, but of determination. Behind the walls, I could hear Laurel moving through the house. Her footsteps on the hardwood were light, tentative, as if she were skirting the edges of a crime scene she had orchestrated. I closed my eyes and focused on her soft, even breathing. She must be in the living room rehearsing her story. The cold husband, the neglectful spouse, the phantom mistress. I pictured the conversation she would have with her parents, her father nodding, her brothers bristling in righteous anger, each syllable sharpening the blade of their shared narrative. While I wiped the sting from my nose, I let their words play through my mind as if overhearing a clandestine broadcast. "You've been distant," she'd say, voice quivering with faux concern. "You've been working late, disappearing on calls, hiding your phone." And when her parents asked why, she would produce her evidence, a carefully doctored call log, a photograph of my car outside my colleague's apartment, a timestamp she'd manipulated to suggest impropriety. I could almost see her soft hands twisting the truth into a rope to bind me. Anger arose like a tide, but I pushed it aside. Tonight, I would not react. Tonight, I would listen. I knew every detail of the story. After all, I had lived it. I knew how exhausted I'd been juggling late nights at the firm with the demands of holiday planning. I knew the evening I stopped by Sarah's place to drop off her forgotten scarf. And how my simple kindness twisted into proof of betrayal. She had left out that Sarah had been distraught about a family emergency, that she had tears in her eyes and gratitude on her lips. Laurel never mentioned those details. Those truths would undermine her lies, so she discarded them like unwanted ornaments. I unfolded another paper towel and pressed it to my cheek, feeling the damp warmth seep through my fingers. Every ache, every bruise was a testament not to my guilt, but to their desperation to preserve an ideal. I was the villain in their festive fable, the spoiled gift they could unwrap and cast aside. Their dream of a perfect holiday hinged on my silence and my disgrace. But I refused to be a footnote in their story. I would not disappear like a stray ornament knocked from the tree. I stood and splashed more water on my face, the sting sharpening my senses. The lies Laurel spun were about to lock me out of my life, my home, my career. She had already changed the locks on my office email, revoked my access to accounts I had built from scratch, and scrubbed my name from reports and presentations. If she succeeded in painting me as a cheater, a drunk, a dangerous man, her father's firm would drop me like a hot coal, leaving me with nothing but bruises and a tarnished reputation. But I wasn't helpless. As I toddled off, I felt a plan form, step by deliberate step. First, I would collect every piece of evidence they had manipulated against me. Emails, text messages, phone records. I would turn them over to whoever needed to see the truth. Then, I would secure my own narrative. Call logs from before the locked doors. Witness testimonies from colleagues who could attest to my whereabouts. Hospital records if necessary. They might break into my home and steal my phone, but they could never erase digital history writ across multiple servers. My fingers lingered on the cold chrome faucet for a moment, gathering strength from the fixture's unyielding firmness. I slipped a hand into my pocket and felt the reassuring bulge of a small flash drive I had created days earlier, containing backups of every report I had contributed to at Pinefield Holdings. On that drive were my designs, my intellectual property, the very foundation of my career. I had concealed it beneath my sock, a secret I hadn't yet revealed to Laura, another layer of insurance against her deception. The more I thought of her lies, the colder my blood ran. The trail was one thing. Calculated, systematic erasure of my identity was another. I taught myself to compartmentalize emotions, empathize with others, dissect conflicts, design solutions. Now, I would apply that precision to my own life. I would map out every contact, every account, every testimony. If she claimed I vanished, I'd prove I was everywhere. At meetings, at charity events, on recorded video. If she said I ran off to cheat, I'd show the time-stamped receipts from coffee shops, the security logs from research labs. When my calm felt absolute, I finally exhaled. The storm of anger and pain receded, replaced by clarity. I buttoned my shirt, adjusted the collar in the mirror, and inspected the small bruise blossoming near my eye. It would fade, but the lesson wouldn't. Never let anyone else write your story. I cracked my knuckles, then flexed them until the ache beneath my own skin grounded me. I opened the bathroom door and stepped into the dim hallway. Laurel's footsteps fell silent as I passed, as if she sensed I was no longer merely a pawn in her narrative, but a player capable of rewriting the rules. My phone lay silent on the counter. Her lies had locked me out. But I had more important tools now. Truth, preparation, and a plan. I walked toward the front door, not to flee, but to begin gathering what I needed. Outside, the Christmas lights blinked cheerfully, oblivious to the war unfolding in their cold glow. In the holiday tradition she loved so dearly, Laurel sought the happy ending where the husband repented. But this was not her story to tell. Of my life would not be defined by her lies or her locks. It would be defined by the quiet, relentless steps of a man reclaiming his own fate, one piece of evidence at a time, until the locks shuddered and broke under the weight of truth. The house was quiet, too quiet, the kind of silence that doesn't come from peace but from something colder, something still settling in the walls like dust after a demolition. I sat on the edge of the guest room bed, shoulders aching, eyes swollen, the taste of dried blood lingering in my mouth. The morning sunlight leaked through the blinds and thin slats across the floor, slicing the shadows like prison bars. And then I saw him, Micah, my son, 8 years old, brave and bright-eyed, still in his striped pajamas, standing just outside the hallway where the guest room met the kitchen. He didn't say anything, just stood there, small fingers gripping the doorframe, his wide brown eyes locked on mine. He'd been up long enough to see the aftermath, maybe even long enough to witness the violence firsthand. I forced myself to stand, despite the soreness. My left hip screamed in protest from where I'd slammed into the fridge. My hand trembled slightly as I reached out to him. "Hey, buddy," I said, crouching down until we were eye level. Micah didn't move. His bottom lip was curled under his teeth, his brows drawn tight, confused. The kind of expression kids wear when they see something that doesn't make sense, like a dog driving a car or a parent bleeding on the kitchen floor. He hadn't seen me like that before. Beaten, helpless, hushed, and worst of all, accused of something I didn't do. "Everything's okay," I whispered. It was a lie, and we both knew it. My voice was, my words slow like I was pulling them through molasses. But I smiled through the pain, not because I wanted to deceive him, but because I had to be his anchor, even if the boat was already sinking. Micah looked past me toward the kitchen, then back. I knew what he was searching for. His mother. Answers. Stability. A version of the story that didn't involve the man he loved being hurt by the people he trusted. I wanted to tell him that I'd never hurt his mom, that I'd never betray this family. But what would that mean to a child when the grown-ups had already decided the narrative? Laurel said, "You." He paused, mouth moving around the shape of the word like it burned. She said, "You did a bad thing." The sentence felt like it came from someone else, rehearsed, repeated, probably whispered in his ear that morning while I was icing my face behind a locked door. It cut deeper than any punch I'd taken the night before. "She told you that?" I asked gently, fighting to keep the emotion from rising in my throat. Micah nodded, as never leaving mine. I sat down on the carpet, knees bent, and patted the floor beside me. He hesitated but walked over slowly and lowered himself onto the rug. His little shoulder brushed mine. I could feel how tense he was, how unsure, and still he sat close. That was enough for now. "You remember the scarf she found in the car?" I asked. He nodded again. That belonged to Miss Sarah from Daddy's office. She left it behind one night, and I gave her a ride home. That's it. No secrets, no bad things. Michael looked down at his niece. "Why was Mommy crying?" "Because she was building a stage. Because she needed an audience. Because drama has a price tag and I was the only one who never saw the receipt." She was upset. I said, "And when people get upset, sometimes they say things they don't mean. Or they say things without having all the facts." He looked up at me again. "Did she hit you?" I shook my head. No, not her. But some things happened that shouldn't have. Silence returned, this time heavier. I wanted to protect him from all of it. The rage, the betrayal, the manipulation. But I couldn't bubble wrap the world. I couldn't unshow him the blood on the kitchen tile. I couldn't erase the sound of Seth's fist or the way Jordan's ring had split the skin above my cheek. All I could do now was give him something to hold on to, something real. "You know I love you, right?" I said, putting my arm around him gently. His head rested against my side. "I know." We stayed like that for a long while, long enough for the house to start waking up, long enough to hear Laurel's heels click against the hardwood as she moved from the bedroom to the kitchen. The microwave beeped. Cupboards opened and closed. Normal sounds, familiar ones. And yet, everything was different now. Eventually, Micah stood and gave me one last look. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. The bruise on my face had said enough. The silence he carried with him down the hall. That said more. I remained seated, listening as Laurel's voice floated toward him. Soft, sweet, careful. Did you sleep well, honey? Daddy's not feeling well, so give him some space today, okay? There it was again. That manipulation, dressed up as motherly concern. That calculated tone, that masked control with kindness. She wasn't just painting a version of me that was broken. She was painting herself as the savior, the mother who stood strong in the storm. But what she hadn't counted on was Micah seeing me before her words got to him. She hadn't expected him to witness the reality before she rewrote it. And in that silent hallway, with blood still drying under my fingernails, I saw something shift. Micah might not understand the trail yet. He might not grasp the weight of false accusations or the cruelty of silence. But he saw. And more importantly, he remembered that moment, that connection. It was the seed of truth I knew would grow in time. When everything else faded, when the pictures came down and the holidays passed and Laurel's stories turned into contradictions, Micah would still remember the look on my face and the weight of my voice when I said, "Everything's okay." Because it wasn't, and he knew it. And that was enough for now. Dawn arrived with a sky the color of bruised lavender. The world hushed as if holding its breath. I sat up on the edge of the bed in the guest room, the one I had chosen because it was furthest from the kitchen, furthest from the scene of my disgrace, and surveyed the small pile of belongings on the nightstand. My wallet, my keys, the flash drive packed with every project file I vowed to protect, and a single clean shirt folded neatly. My knees protested as I swung my feet to the floor, each movement sending a dull ache through muscles still stiff from the violent end to Christmas Eve. In the dim light, the room looked like any other Sunday morning retreat, but it was the scene of my departure. I paused at the doorway, turning to take in the house that had once felt like sanctuary. Holiday lights still twinkled through frosted windows. Half-forgotten tinsel drooped from the banister. And somewhere in the living room, a half-empty plate of gingerbread cookies cooled on a side table. It was a silent tableau of the life I used to have. Laughter, warmth, love. This morning, though, it felt like a mausoleum. Every ornament a memorial to my ruined trust. I exhaled slowly and let the silence fill me, allowing it to steal my resolve. I walked down the hallway barefoot, toes grazing the runner rug, and each step carried the weight of a finality I had postponed for too long. I passed Micah's closed door and placed a gentle hand on the doorknob. His name, painted in cheerful primary colors, glowed softly in the early light. I pressed my palm to the wood, imagining him asleep inside, unaware that I would not be there when he woke. I wanted to scoot inside, stroke his hair, whisper that Daddy was going away for a little while but would come back soon. But I knew better. My departure had to be silent, irrevocable. I let go of the knob and moved on, feeling as though I were shedding pieces of myself with each step. At the front door, I paused again. The lock creaked softly as I fitted my key, and I half expected a voice, Laurel's, Micah's, to call me back. But there was only the morning air, crisp against the glass panels. I slid the bolt free and opened the door, stepping into a driveway slick with dew. The chill bit through my pajama pants and I hugged my shoulders, trying to steal the tremor I felt inside. The tremor born of fear, regret, and that strange, heavy guilt that sometimes accompanies self-preservation. I closed the door without turning the latch, letting it swing softly behind me. No slam, no announcement, just the quiet click of what on frame. I slung my duffel bag over my shoulder, its strap cutting into sore ribs, and looked up at the sky, which was now brightening to a pale rose. Down the street, newspaper trucks rumbled past, their drivers oblivious to the wounded man treading silently across the frostist grass. My car sat where I'd left it, keys dangling from the ignition. I unlocked the door and slid inside, the leather seat cold against my back. All the sensors lit up in a dull glow, and I allowed myself a moment to check my reflection in the rearview mirror. My left eye remained swollen, purple, blue, a reminder that some wounds did not fade with forgiveness. I ran a shaky hand over my cheek and then placed a firmer grip on the steering wheel. A deep inhale, a deliberate exhale, and then I started the engine. The drive across town was quiet, safe for the hum of the tires on the wet pavement. I mapped out the route in my mind. Left on Elm to bypass the main roads, then 2 rides to skirt the downtown traffic, and finally a ride into the old brick building where Jonas lived. Each turn steered me further from the wreckage of my home life, and closer to a lifeline I wasn't sure I deserved. My phone, which Laurel had locked the night before, lay hidden in the glove compartment, replaced by an older model I'd kept for emergencies. I thumbed the screen. No voicemail, no texts, no missed calls. My world had gone silent with one swift elbow to the kidney. When I pulled up outside Jonas's building, the sun was just cresting the skyline, painting the alleyway in gentle gold. I parked in my usual spot, a battered space reserved for his ancient sedan. Before I could convince myself to turn around, I yanked open the door, grabbed the bag, and trudged up the narrow stairwell. The paint on the walls peeled like old scabs and the carpet smelled of stale beer. But to me, it felt like home. Jonas's door swung open before I even knocked. He stood there in an oversized hoodie, one eyebrow arched in silent question. I couldn't read his expression at first. His mouth curved in concern, his gaze flicked to my bruised face and back to mine. He said nothing. He didn't need the details. He just stepped aside. The apartment was small, a sagging couch that looked like it had hosted too many late-night gaming sessions, a coffee table cluttered with open notebooks and empty coffee mugs, and a desk by the window with 2 laptop screens glowing, an Ethernet cable snaking toward the router in the corner. It was the kind of place where someone who prioritized work over decor would live, and someone who valued friendship above formality. I dropped my bag onto the couch and sinking beside it. The cushions groaned, but I found a measure of relief in the slight give. Jonas crossed the room and sat next to me, close enough to offer warmth without crowding. He didn't offer coffee. He didn't ask if I needed ice. He just said in a voice rough with sleep but steady and intent, "When you're ready." His words hit me like a hammer. When you're ready, not when you forgive them, not when you make sense of it all, just when you're ready. He held my gaze, waiting for me to say more. I swallowed and cleared my throat, tasting old blood and bitter resolve. "I'm leaving," I said. Jonas nodded as though he had already known. I figured. "I can't go back," I whispered, voice cracking. "Not yet." "Not like that." He leaned back, propping his arm on the couch's backrest. "Don't go back until you know how to win." I stared at him, trying to parse the meaning behind those words. They weren't a pep talk. They weren't empty promises. They were a strategy, They were the kind of counsel I needed, simple, direct, tactical. "I need to figure out the next move," I said. It came out as a confession, but I felt a strange relief in admitting it. He cracked a half smile. "Then figure it out. I'll help." In that moment, the ache in my bones seemed to dull, replaced by a spark of something I hadn't felt since I left home. Possibility. The day stretched ahead, blank pages waiting for me to write a new narrative. No longer anchored by fear or bloody by lies, I realized I had a choice. To stay broken or to build something unbreakable. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the flash drive. Jonas's eyes flicked to it. I handed it over without a word. He slipped the drive into his palm and gave my knee a firm squeeze. In silence, he stood and headed for the desk, already plugging the drive into his computer. The whir of the hard drive spinning up filled the room. I slumped deeper into the couch and watched the sunrise spill through the window, painting the threadbare carpet and streaks of gold. The world beyond Jonas's dusty windowsill was waking, oblivious to my battle, but I felt ready, not healed, not whole, but ready. Because for the first time since the fridge had slammed into my back, I knew I wasn't alone. And when I was ready, I would step back into the light with evidence, with allies, and with the quiet certainty that no one could write my story but me. I agreed to meet Laurel at the Willow Cafe because she had summoned me with a tone so unfailingly calm that it set my teeth on edge. She said she wanted to clear the air, to find closure, to move past the misunderstanding that had cost me everything: my home, my dignity, my career. The cafe was nestled on a quiet side street, its pale teal awning fluttering in the winter breeze. Inside, the air smelled of cinnamon, steam rising from lattes in delicate spirals. I wondered if the warmth would thaw the chill settling in my gut. Laurel sat at a corner table, the one by the window where morning sunlight lit her face like a spotlight. She wore a cream-colored coat with gold buttons, new, obviously, over a cashmere sweater that matched the soft pink of her cheeks. Her hair was coiffed just enough to look effortless, and her lips curved into a practice smile. Around her, the cafe hummed with the low murmur of conversation, the clink of porcelain. But she sat alone as if she had summoned the entire scene for our private reckoning. I paused in the doorway, the bell above me jingling a warning. Then I squared my shoulders, adjusted the collar of my jacket, and approached. Her eyes flickered over me, taking in the faint bruise near my jaw, the tight set of my lips. She gestured to the chair across from her. When I sat, the table between us felt narrower than usual, like a border made of ceramic and sugar packets. "Thank you for coming," she said, voice soft. No apology, no acknowledgement of pain, just gratitude for my presence. I folded my hands on the table. I could feel the weight of every unread text, every unanswered call buried in the pocket of my coat. I chose to leave them there. "I'm glad we can talk," I replied. My voice didn't tremble, though my heart hammered in my chest. I watched her eyes flick downward toward the leather satchel at her feet. "You said you wanted to explain." She nodded, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. I panicked. Everything happened so fast. Your late hours, the scarf. I didn't know what to think. And then I saw how your colleagues looked at you. I felt insecure. So I said things. I said I was afraid you were hiding something. Fear. There it was. The word warmed the space between us like a candle flame. Not honesty, but fear. She had been afraid of being unmed in her comfortable narrative. She'd been afraid of losing the perfect image her family curated. and so she had constructed lies to maintain control. I pressed my fingers against the wood grain of the table and asked, "Did you ever think to ask me?" Her cheeks flushed. "I tried, but you were always so distant. You didn't respond. I only had pieces." "And she exhaled, hating herself more than she hated me. "I did what I thought I had to do to keep us together." "By destroying me," I whispered. "By erasing me." Her eyes flickered to the door as if she might bolt. Then she met my gaze again, bracing herself. She reached under the table and drew out a flash drive. I recognized the neat, block-lettered label, Proposal Final, DCX. Her hand trembled slightly as she placed it on the table. I didn't touch it. I let it lie there, a bridge from her excuses to my revelation. "Recognize it?" I asked. Her breath caught, pupils widening. She nodded, voice barely a breath. "It's the proposal I drafted for Pinefield Holdings 2 months ago," I said. "The one I sent you for review before the board meeting." She blinked, confusion clouding her features. "Yes," but I held up a hand. Before I knew I'd been locked out, before they scrubbed my name from the credits, before Dad presented it to investors as Laurel's work. Her lips parted as if to speak, then closed. I saw guilt shift in her eyes, a cloud eclipsing the calm facade. "Your father," I let the words hang. "He claimed it as his own. He rebranded my entire section, changed the graphs, rewarded the summary. He presented us, meaning you, as the architects of a $3 million deal that stands as the cornerstone of Pinefield's latest round." She opened her mouth, closed it, swallowed. "I didn't know." I shook my head. "You did. You emailed me that afternoon, asked me to congratulate him in confidence. You filtered my replies. You forwarded his emails without my signature. Then you both sat back and watched me fade from every acknowledgement." Tears shimmered in her eyes. "Now I thought if we kept too close I'd feel secure, but it backfired. I lost the person I love. I hurt you." I leaned forward, voice low but unyielding. "You didn't just hurt me. You erased me professionally. My life turned upside down because of one file stripped of my name. Do you know what that does to a man?" Her tears spilled and she reached across the table to grasp my hand, but I pulled away. "No," I said, "you don't, because you haven't lost your reputation. You haven't felt colleagues look away when you enter a room. You haven't spent nights wondering if any job you've ever done is now invalid." She closed her eyes and nodded as though she were taking an internal vow. I noticed a tremor in her fingers as she fiddled with the flash drive. I picked it up. Its plastic casing was cool under my thumb. "This drive," I said, lifting it so she could see, "contains every document I contributed to. Emails, spreadsheets, design mock-ups, everything." Her eyes flicked to it, desperation igniting in her gaze. "Give it back," she whispered. "Please." I stared at the metal tip. Imagine plugging it in at Jonas's apartment, watching the file scroll across the screen in smug vindication. I felt the surge of power that comes from holding incontrovertible evidence. But I didn't hand it back. I slid it into my pocket. "I'll make a copy," I said quietly. "I'll keep it safe. Then I'll decide what to do with it." She reached out again, tears streaking her cheeks. "I'm sorry, Griffin. I never meant to hurt you like this." "I know," I said, voice softer now, but still firm. "And I never meant to leave you without answers." Her shoulders shook with silent sobs. I stood, pulling on my coat. The light from the window gleamed off the table, illuminating the crumbs of a half-eaten scone. Evidence of the small life we once shared. reduced to fragments. "I need time," I said. "I need to rebuild what you helped destroy. And I can't do that with you in my life. At least not yet." With that, I turned and walked out of the Willow Cafe, leaving behind the scent of coffee and cinnamon, the echo of her apologies, and a future I intended to reclaim one flash drive at a time. Jonas wasn't just my friend. He was the key to a secret I'd carried in my pocket since that morning in the Willow Cafe. He'd listened as I explained how the proposal flash drive was only the beginning of the undoing they'd orchestrated, how my name had vanished from every success I'd built. And then he leaned forward, eyes bright. "I know someone who's been watching you," he'd said, "and he's not on your side yet." Cam Rotis's name sounded like a challenge as Jonas spoke it for the first time. Camden Rotis, the CEO of Strayite Tech, Pinefield's fiercest competitor. Camden was known in our industry as a shark, brilliant, ruthless, and always 3 moves ahead. He built Strayite from a garage startup into a tech powerhouse that supplied predictive analytics platforms to cities, corporations, and even government agencies. His company had been circling Pinefield Holdings' board, looking for any crack in their armor. My abrupt disappearance and the scandals swirling around me, Camden would see it as the perfect opportunity. That afternoon, I found myself standing in Strayite's glass-walled lobby, the place humming with calculated energy. I wore my best suit, one that Laurel had once picked out for my promotions. The crisp navy fabric felt ironic against the dull ache in my ribs. A receptionist led me past white bars filled with algorithmic diagrams and oversized monitors displaying real-time data visualizations. Every staff member I passed was focused, purposeful, unaware of the bruised man threading through their midst with a hidden agenda. Jonas met me in Camden's office, a sleek corner room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline. Camden himself stood by the window, back to me, hands clasped behind his tailored suit. He turned slowly, as if savoring the reveal. His face was sharp, high cheekbones, steel-gray eyes that missed nothing, and a slight smile that suggested he had bet on my outcome long ago. "Griffin Ward," he said, voice even but resonant. "I hear you've experienced complications." I swallowed, chest. "I have, and I need a job." Camden's smile deepened. "I don't hire for pity, Mr. Ward." "No pity," I said, stepping forward. "Performance." I placed the flash drive I'd copied onto his sleek mahogany desk. "Proof." He picked up the drive, studying the label, key designs. He didn't open it yet. He just looked at me and said, "Go on." I told him everything. The Christmas Eve assault, the manufactured allegations, the professional eraser. I recounted how the proposal I'd authored had been rebranded under Laurel's name. I outlined the plan I'd sketched that morning: gather evidence, rebuild my reputation, and take down Pinefield's next bid. Throughout, Camden listened with unblinking attention, nodding occasionally, his steely gaze never wavering. When I finished, silence stretched between us like a taut cable. Jonas stood behind me, arms crossed, eyes steady. Camden set the flash drive on his desk without touching it again. He steepled his fingers and leaned back. "This," he said, glancing at the drive, "is exactly why I'm interested." "Interested in what?" I asked, wary. "In you," he replied. "Your talent, your designs, and your vendetta." He rose, walking to the window. "I've watched your projects at Pinefield. Innovative solutions, elegant code, visionary integration. You're the reason my analysts flagged you 2 quarters ago." He turned, eyes glittering, but I waited. I saw the headlines about your troubles and thought, opportunity. I tugged on my jacket sleeve. I'm not asking for charity. No, he smiled again, a rare, genuine curve of his lips. I'm offering a partnership. He returned to his desk and opened a drawer, revealing a thick folder stamped with the Strayite logo. Chief Innovation Consultant, he said, sliding the folder toward me. 9-figure projects, equity options, complete autonomy over your designs. You build the future here, Griffin, and together we'll bid on Pinefield's upcoming city infrastructure contract. We'll do it anonymously using a shell company tied to select Strayite partners. We win, we celebrate, and then we reveal our connector. The man they disowned. He tapped his temple. My pulse raced. Camden's proposal was more than I dared hope. A position of influence, a stake in a competitor firm, and the means to orchestrate the very downfall I dreamed of. Yet, I hesitated. What about confidentiality, non-compete clauses? He chuckled softly. I don't need NDAs with anyone who steals my talent, and I am not interested in Pinefield's trade secrets. They're obsolete compared to your vision. This is business warfare. You are my weapon, Mr. Ward, and I will equip you. I leaned forward, eyes locked on the folder. Why take the risk for me? Camden's gaze sharpened. Because I respect anticipation. I respect a man who turns betrayal into strategy. You don't panic. You plan. You endure. That's the rarest resource in this world. Jonas stepped around the desk and offered his hand. Welcome aboard. I stood and shook Camden's hand first, then Jonas's. The grip was firm, like sealing an alliance forged in fire. The weight of the moment sank in. I was no longer a victim. I was a player again. Camden gestured to his small celebration waiting outside his office. Champagne flutes on the silver tray, perfect for welcoming new talent. I followed him through the open doorway past curious onlookers to a quiet alcove bathed in winter sunlight. Jonas and I clinked glasses, the fine bubbles dancing at the brim. To new beginnings, I said, voice steady. And well-planned endings, Jonas muttered. I let the glass rest on my lips, tasted the champagne's crispness, and felt resolve crystallize in my chest. This was the deal I'd taken behind their backs, a chance to reclaim everything they'd stolen, disguised as a leap forward in my career. And beneath the veneer of civility, I could already see the battlefield, the bid, the proposal, the moment when Strayite would unveil our anonymous offer, and Pinefield's board would crumble beneath it. I let the warmth spread through me as we tapped our glasses again. The plan was set. The alliance was sealed. And somewhere back at Pinefield Holdings, my enemies would soon notice the ripples before the tsunami. Because sometimes the most devastating strikes are delivered not with a shout, but with a handshake and a quietly signed contract. The morning of the City Infrastructure Board presentation dawned in a hush of anticipation. I woke before sunrise in my sleek Strayite condo. The skyline outside my window awash in pale gold. A mug of black coffee steamed in my hand as I studied the slick black briefcase on the conference table. Inside it lay everything I had spent months perfecting. My patented prototype schematics, the integrated systems roadmap, and the predictive analytics model that would blow Pinefield's half-finished pitch out of the water. I took a slow breath, feeling the tension in my ribcage remind me of past injustices. Then let it go. Today, all of that would matter less than the power of our unified vision. In the elevator down, I caught my reflection in the polished stainless steel doors. Tidy suit, tie knotted just so, posture straight. No trace of the man with a broken nose. No hint of the man who once cowered behind locked doors. Instead, I looked every inch the consummate professional. Confident, composed, ready. Camden's office buzzed behind me, the sin of freshly cleaned carpets and laser printers filling the air. Jonas met me in the lobby, already reviewing projections on his tablet. His nod was curt but supportive, a silent affirmation that our plan was as sound as we believed. We arrived at City Hall just before the board assembled. Marble pillars rose to a domed ceiling, and the morning sun filtered through stained glass windows, casting colored patterns across the marble floors. Reporters clustered by the entrance, their cameras and microphones feverish with curiosity. I caught sight of a Pinefield representative in the crowd, Mr. Halberg himself, Laurel's father, his polished shoes clicking across the hall as he greeted dignitaries with a practiced smile. He paused when our eyes met. His expression flickered. Surprise, perhaps, or something darker. I gave him a courteous nod and turned away, posture unbroken. Inside the hearing room, the board members took their seats at a long mahogany table. I counted them. 8 city council members, the mayor at one end, and 2 advisory appointees at the other. Pinefield's team sat clustered together on one side, Laurel in the center, her powder blue blazer a beacon among their muted grays. Behind her sat Seth and Jordan, bristling with confidence, certain they held the winning hand. I couldn't help but wonder if they remembered the man whose blood had once stained their fridge door. The session began with formalities: roll call, conflict of interest, disclosures, the mayor's welcome. Then the Pinefield team took the podium. Their lead presenter launched into the half-polished slides. A cityscape laced with their innovative sensors, basic analytics dashboards, a long-winded emphasis on safety protocols that seemed more like padding than substance. The board members nodded along politely, but the energy in the room sagged. I whispered to Jonas, "They've done this all before," and he exhaled a soft chuckle in agreement. When it was our turn, Camden rose first, stride smooth and measured. He introduced me as the chief innovation consultant whose cutting-edge prototype formed the backbone of the proposal. My moment came as he clicked to my opening slide, a 3D rendering of a city model alive with real-time data streams and predictive traffic flows. The room leaned forward. I stepped to the lectern, glanced at the board, and began. "Good morning," I said, voice clear, calm. "I'm Griffin Ward, and this is Stray-Out Text Vision for CityLink, a system that not only responds to urban challenges, but predicts them before they happen." I pace slowly, letting the words sink in. I highlighted how our integrated sensors, powered by my patented algorithm, could forecast congestion, optimize energy consumption, and even preempt safety risks by modeling human behavior patterns. I watched the board members' eyes shift from polite interest to "this is at focus." At one point, a council member interrupted. "Mr. Ward, your prototype relies heavily on unattended data gathering. How do you address privacy concerns?" I let a beat pass, then said, "We built privacy into the core. Data is anonymized and encrypted at the source, with individual identifiers stripped before analysis. Citations and logs are audit trail, ensuring transparency and community trust." I clicked to a slide showing a streamlined encryption workflow. "Plain, robust, unassailable," one board member murmured. "Impressive." Laurel's cheeks slackened as she watched me dismantle every talking point they had counted on. I saved the most powerful reveal for last, a live demo. Jonas triggered the simulation from a tablet, and behind me on the screen, CityLink's dashboard sprang to life. A live camera feed of the intersection outside City Hall flickered on, superimposed with predictive markers. Arrows indicating likely pedestrian crossings, heat map showing potential bottlenecks, and an alert flag where a stalled vehicle would affect traffic flow in 15 minutes. The board gasped. The mayor leaned forward, tapping his pen. Laurel's mouth hung open. When the simulation concluded, silence stretched. Then applause broke out, tentative at first, then genuine. One by one, board members nodded, exchanged approving glances and scribbled notes. Pinefield's team sat frozen, mouths moving in silent disbelief. While behind them, I imagined Laurel's father's mind racing. How had we pulled this off so flawlessly? I concluded with a soft smile. We believe CityLink transforms infrastructure from reactionary to visionary. I clicked off the slide. We respectfully request your vote. I stepped back, heart calm, chest proud. Camden joined me, clasped my shoulder, and the two of us stood together as the room buzzed with questions and clarifications. After 20 minutes of probing inquiries, the board chairman called for a vote. One by one, hands rose. 7 in favor, 1 against. An unprecedented margin. The mayor smiled broadly and announced, "Stray Light Tech will lead the CityLink project." My pulse fluttered as relief and triumph washed over me. I looked to Camden, then to Jonas, who gave me a slow nod that said, "You did it." Laurel fled the podium with her head down. Seth and Jordan looked as though they'd been punched. I allowed myself a small smile as they filed out, their confidence shattered on that polished hardwood floor. Outside, cameras flashed as reporters clamored for interviews. I allowed Camden to field their questions. He was the leader now, but I was the architect. I slipped through the crowd and exited into the crisp morning air. On the steps of City Hall, I removed my tie and loosened my collar, breathing deep. The sun warmed my face, and I felt the last remnants of that bruised Christmas night fall away. I had shifted the spotlight from victim to visionary, from disgraced husband to industry trailblazer. I proved that silence and strategy could be more powerful than fists and lies. As I walked to my car, phone buzzing with congratulatory messages, I tapped through my emails until one caught my eye. A forwarded message from Laurel. Subject line, "Congratulations." I paused, thumb hovering over the screen. Then I smiled and deleted it, because now in this new chapter, the only messages that mattered were the ones I pinned myself. When the CityLink contract went to Stray Light Tech, the ripple effect was immediate and merciless. From the moment the vote was announced, the cracks and Laurel's carefully constructed world widened into chasms. I watched it all unfold from the window of my new office, steel and glass overlooking the city's skyline, knowing every triumph mirrored a collapse somewhere back on Pinefield's polished floors. Within hours, Laurel's father, Henry Halberg, was calling her into his study. I could picture him there now, elbows on mahogany, jaw clenched, eyes cold as winter twilight. He blamed her for the family's humiliation. "You led him close," he must have thundered. "You handed them our secrets on a silver platter." His words would have cut sharper than any fist, because this time the weapon was his own daughter's naive loyalty. Word spread quickly through Halberg Holdings. Ward members whispered about the security breach that cost them a multi-million-dollar contract. They speculated about leaks, incompetence, the trail. Even the public narrative twisted the story. Pinefield's proposal was challenging, promising, but ultimately overshadowed by Stray Liability's superior technology. Never mind that the difference was me. My name echoed in the board minutes in the city's press releases on every tech block. I had slipped back into relevance, not as a casualty, but as the catalyst for their downfall. Meanwhile, Laurel's brothers, Seth and Jordan, found themselves under scrutiny. Investors who once sought their connections suddenly recoiled. Old partnerships dissolved. Jordan's legal credentials were called into question after someone uncovered irregularities in the client contracts he'd supervised. When shareholders read the fine print, they discovered missing clauses and inflated fees that mirrored his aggressive deal-making style. Questions arose. Had Jordan overstepped? Had he manipulated numbers to boost quarterly earnings? The firm launched an internal audit that landed him on administrative leave. Seth, on the other hand, faced a more personal reckoning. As vice president of development, he'd been the public face of Pinefield's outreach initiatives. When the CityLink presentation went live online, someone at Strayite leaked footage of Seth discussing partnership deals in a private video call. Footage that showed him disparaging city officials and promising undisclosed personal kickbacks. The scandal went viral. By the next morning, Seth had lost multiple board positions and been forced to resign from several philanthropic boards. His reputation unraveled as swiftly as his announcements had once bolstered Pinefield's image. Lel called me 2 days later, voice trembling behind a veneer of composed apology. "They're blaming me," she whispered. "Dad's furious. He said I cost him everything." I listened as she recounted the litany of accusations. "You broke the family. You ruined us." And in her defense, she offered that she'd only ever wanted to be safe. Safe in her parents' world. Safe in the illusion of harmony. But safety, she learned, was an illusion purchased at the expense of others' truths. She begged for advice. What could she say? How could she explain? I felt a flicker of pity before I squashed it. Compassion now felt like a luxury I couldn't afford. She'd weaponized my integrity for her own comfort. She'd watched me bleed and then blamed me for staining their perfect holiday tableau. The balance had shifted. She was no longer the wronged wife. She was a reckless architect of her own ruin. Instead of soft words, I offered clarity. "You can't blame technology," I told her, "or me. You need to own your choices. Admit you panicked. Admit you lied. Otherwise your father's anger will turn on you too." Silence crackled through the line. She pressed on. "But what about us? What about Micah?" I closed my eyes at the mention of our son, whose life was already fractured by family warfare. "There's no us anymore," I said softly. "There's you and your family and the consequences of what you did." Her sobs rattled the connection. I muted my phone before I could hear more. Their downfall was complete. The firm's stock had dipped. Major clients were considering alternate bids, and the Hallberg name, once synonymous with stability and tradition, was tarnished by scandal. I watched headlines proclaiming Pinefield Holdings and crisis and family feud costs major contract, each article a monument to my vindication. I tried not to smile, but the satisfaction was inevitable. Yet victory tasted bittersweet. For every investor who congratulated me, I thought of Micah, caught in the crossfire of adult ambition. I thought of the tears in Laurel's voice and the fear in his 8-year-old eyes the night he first saw my bruised face. I'd promised him truth, but I hadn't promised him escape from sacrifice. In reclaiming my name, I was ripping apart the world he had known. Late that evening, I stood on my balcony, the city's glow reflected in the river, and allowed myself a moment of honest reflection. I had engineered a coup against Pinefield Holdings, orchestrating their professional collapse with the precision of a master strategist. I'd leverage my intellect and resilience to transform personal betrayal into a corporate reckoning. But at what cost? I could still recall the cold clang of the fridge door against my back, the taste of blood, the hissing punchline of Drama King. That memory was the crucible from which my new identity had emerged. I no longer resembled the man who staggered to Jonas's couch, battered and broken. I was tempered steel now, forged by pain and honed by strategy. But the family that consumed itself had left scorched earth in its wake. Their homes were filled with hollow apologies, shattered trust in the bitter residue of betrayal. I wondered if Laurel's brothers would find redemption, or if their reputations were beyond repair. I wondered if her father, once proud and imposing, would ever look at her without a flicker of disappointment. And I wondered where Micah would find his anchor in a world rebuilt on the ruins of his family's pride. I returned inside and shut the balcony door. My apartment smelled faintly of coffee and electronics, a sanctuary of solitude and ambition. I turned on my new desk lamp and opened my laptop to a fresh email marked "Invitation to Present." It was from Camden, inviting me to lead a keynote in San Francisco next month. Another stage, another audience. I hesitated for a heartbeat, remembering how the best-laid plans sometimes require detours. But then I typed a reply, finger steady. I accept. As I had sinned, I felt the familiar surge of purpose. The family I once loved had devoured itself to maintain an illusion. I had been their scapegoat, their villain. Now, in their absence, I was free to chart my own course. I would build new alliances, forge new legacies, and cradle the fragile spark of trust in my son's heart. Because being the man they didn't see coming wasn't enough. I intended to be the man who built a life so resilient, so unassailable that no lie or punch could ever dismantle it again. I walked into the courtroom wearing my best navy suit, the one Laurel had picked out for our anniversary before everything fell apart. My shoulders were squared, though inside I felt the same ache that had settled in my chest the night they slammed me against the refrigerator. The gallery was half full, friends, curious onlookers, and at least one reporter scribbling notes. But I focused on the bench where Judge Landon presided. Sunlight filtered through tall windows, illuminating the raised podium where Laurel sat, her lawyer at her side. I took a steadying breath, reminding myself that every step I'd taken since Christmas had led to this moment. When my attorney, Marisol Vega, called my name, I rose and approached the stand. My son, Micah, sat in the front row with Jonas and Camden behind him. He looked small in his school uniform, knuckles white as he gripped his mother's old scarf. I swallowed and lifted my chin. The prosecutor's opening remark accused me of instability, of harboring resentments that could harm my child. But I was prepared. I had assembled witnesses, documents, videos, every crumb of evidence they'd hoped would keep me silent. First up was Jonas. He spoke calmly about my character, about nights spent drafting contracts side by side, about my unwavering commitment to honesty and excellence. His words felt like a shield, repelling the doubts Laurel's family had sworn. Then Camden took the stand, describing how I led Stray's pivotal presentation, how my designs had transformed entire systems. He didn't mention revenge. He spoke of innovation, integrity, and the respect I'd earned in the industry. In his testimony, I felt the invisible chains of my past cracking. The strongest moment came when Marisol played the nanny cam footage. The grainy video showed Laurel's brothers lunging at me, Seth's fist striking my face, Jordan's kick knocking me off balance. And there, crisp and clear, Laurel's hand yanked my phone away as I reached for help. The room fell silent. Even Laurel's lawyer shrank in his seat. In that hush, I sensed justice pivoting toward me. Micah watched the screen, eyes wide, but he didn't look away. I caught his gaze and offered a small nod. He let out a breath and sat straighter. He saw the truth, unfiltered. The judge leaned forward, scribbled a note, and cleared her throat. When it was my turn, I stood and addressed the courtroom. Your Honor, I love my son more than anything. I want him to grow up safe, secure, and proud of his father. My voice wavered briefly, then steadied. I asked for sole custody so I can protect him from lies and violence, to give him the stability he deserves. Laurel's lawyer tried one last objection, questioning whether I could provide a balanced environment. Marisol countered with evidence of my new home, my flexible schedule, and my support network. As they spoke, I noticed the expressions on the judges' faces: nods, thoughtful frowns, the slow unraveling of preconceived notions. When the judge finally announced her decision, awarding me full custody, I felt a surge of relief so fierce it took my breath away. Leaving the courtroom, Micah ran into my arms. He hugged me tight, whispering, "I knew you'd win, Dad." His words were a salve to old wounds. Outside, cameras flashed, but I paid them no mind. This victory wasn't for the headlines. It was for my son. I had reclaimed more than custody. I'd reclaimed my identity, my integrity, and the promise of a future where truth stood stronger than any lie. And as we walked out together, I knew that whatever came next, we would face it side by side, father and son, bound by blood and honesty. The sun had just begun its climb when I settled into my home office, the room bathed in warm dawn light. I glanced at the framed photo on my desk, Micah grinning broadly, his small hands clutching a piano certificate. That image was my reminder. This life rebuilt from betrayal and blood belonged to us now. No more lies, no more shadows. I opened my laptop and sifted through the latest emails. Investors from Strayite congratulated me on our success. Colleagues asked for insights on scaling CityLink to other municipalities. I paused over one message, Laurel's name in the cinder line, but deleted it without opening. That chapter was closed. My focus was forward on the blueprints and code I would write, the proposals I would lead, and the honesty I would uphold. A soft knock at the doorframe drew my attention. Micah stood there, sleeves rolled up, eyes bright with excitement. "Dad, can I show you something?" He darted inside and flipped open his music stand, revealing a new piece he learned overnight. "It's a composition by W.C." I smiled, feeling my heart lift. "Play for me." He sat at the piano by the window, fingers dancing over the keys in a delicate cascade of notes. As his music filled the room, I felt the lingering tension of my past dissolve into each shimmering chord. This was peace. Not just the absence of conflict, but the presence of purpose. When he finished, I applauded quietly. "That was beautiful, buddy." He beamed, and I ruffled his hair. Then he grew serious. "Are you really okay now?" I paused, considering how to answer. The nights of rage and shame felt distant, yet their lessons were etched into my bones. I placed a hand on his shoulder. "I am," I said, "because I learned that truth is the strongest foundation. And with you by my side, I know I'll never lose my way again." Micah nodded and grabbed his backpack. "I'm off to school. See you at the recital tonight." Wouldn't miss it for the world, I replied. As he bounded out the door, I turned to the city beyond my window, streets humming with life. Traffic flowing in patterns our city link system would soon optimize. People moving through the world, unaware of the infrastructure quietly working for them. I watched it, a silent architect of progress, and felt a fierce pride in knowing my designs would shape safer, smarter cities. I sank into my chair and opened a blank document titled Future Projects. Typing the first words, I felt the weight of my old identity lift. Begin with integrity. Build with intention. Never break faith. Beneath that, I sketched ideas for expanding CityLink's analytics to healthcare facilities and emergency services. By the time the afternoon sun slanted through the blinds, I had outlines for 3 new proposals. I closed the document and leaned back, hands behind my head. The man they had tried to break was now the man they couldn't ignore. Not because I shouted the loudest, but because I chose to build steadily, quietly, and with unwavering resolve. When evening came and Micah took the stage for his recital, I sat in the front row, I shining with pride. As his final notes echoed across the hall, I realized that true victory wasn't about contracts or vindication. It was about reclaiming my life, my name, and the simple moments like watching my son play that mattered most. And in that realization, I understood. They never saw me coming, because I was too busy becoming someone worth remembering.